What it do? We're gonna get started a little early, man. Let everybody kind of flow in tonight. First of all, turn this music down. My name is Eyone Williams, Uptown Eyone. I wrote a couple books, Lord of Legends, Fast Lane. Check out my website, www.eyonewilliams.com. And nevertheless, keeping in routine with our city movement supporting Anton White, Eric Hicks, and all the unjustly sentenced men and women caught up in the prison industrial complex. You know, we're going to have another conversation tonight. And tonight we're going to be talking about, once again, unjustly sentenced people, but we're going to be talking to Missy Hicks, the wife of Eric Hicks. Shout out to Eric Hicks and Anton White. And we're going to be talking about their case, and we're going to be talking about how some of these unjust laws affect not only us as people out here in the free world, but how it affects people that's behind those prison walls, and it affects the people that love and support those people behind those prison walls. I'm gonna wait a few minutes till we get a couple more viewers, and then I'm gonna give you a brief little rundown on the First Street crew. And once again, when I'm talking about this stuff and I'm reading it, you know, it's not my opinion. It's not me expressing no type of secrets. What's up? How y'all doing? You know what I mean? This coming straight out the law books is what they accuse these people of. But there's so many men and women that's locked away in prison right now doing life sentences without parole. And we need to address that. Okay, here we go. We about to kick it off right now. Hey, hello, how y'all doing?
How are you?
Oh, we got a guest. Okay, you gonna have to start different. You ain't tell me this early, so you gonna have to introduce. That's how we gonna do this.
I will. Well, I am Missy. I am Eric's wife, and this is our Aunt Sandra. Hi.
How you doing, Aunt Tanya? Nice to meet you. Appreciate you. So we got Aunt Tanya here, we got Missy Hicks here. We're gonna be talking about Eric Hicks, and in the process of talking about Eric Hicks, we're gonna be talking about the whole case. So we're gonna be talking about the First Street crew, and I really want to express to everybody that's viewing now, that's gonna viewing later. This is not me interviewing them, or this is not them interviewing me. We actually, man, voicing a lot of these concerns so we could get help and support for people who may be in these situations that don't know what to do. We just kind of like an open forum. So without talking nobody to death, I want Missy to go ahead and get straight into some of those words of Eric Hicks, if you don't mind.
Sure. So he just wrote a little letter that he wanted me to read as an introduction. These are his direct words. So, all right. He just wanted to thank you for the platform, and thank you to those who have taken the time to tune in. He asks, this year of 2020, what protection does the presumption of innocence afford the Black community if procedures have been devised in federal courts that allow for the circumvention of the fundamental rights? He asks, what protection is the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which is supposed to be a citizen's protection against such an arbitrary procedure when men and women, most of whom are people of color, have been languishing in federal prisons for decades, serving de facto sentences of death for crimes they were either acquitted of, for crimes that were dismissed, or for crimes that were never charged at all. This arbitrary procedure is known in federal court as relevant conduct. And Eyone, I know we're going to get into that. It is a provision of the U.S. sentencing guidelines that is only practiced in federal law that allows a defendant to be punished for acquitted, uncharged, or dismissed crimes if the prosecution can prove the crime as sentencing, not beyond a reasonable doubt as the Fifth Amendment requires, but by a preponderance of the evidence, which is the absolute lowest standard of proof in criminal law. This procedure describes how Anton and I were convicted of a simple conspiracy, which is a conspiracy where no drug quantity is submitted to the jury. They have now been in prison for more than 27 and a half years with no release date on the horizon. They do not question the legitimacy of the jury's verdict. However, they do question, along with our family and friends and the Black community, the morality of a procedure that enabled them to be punished for the more massive conspiracy that the prosecution moved to dismiss because it was unable to prove the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. How does one distinguish a procedure of this nature from the Black codes or the slave codes that were historically used to deprive Black women and men of life and liberty without any semblance of legitimacy? What should we think of the federal government, considering that it has allowed this arbitrary procedure to go unchecked for more than 30 years? So those were the words directly from my husband, just to get started.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, and I don't even want to try to translate that or break that down no more, but you mentioned so many good points in there. I just wanted to go back over and make and double pound one of them, and that is as Erg mentioned about those constitutional rights, specifically that low standard of preponderance of evidence and these things that they're doing with relevant conduct. For people who don't understand what Missy just read through the words of Erg, what she's saying is that if you get convicted of something by a jury, he is saying that the fairness of that is that you should be sentenced to what that jury convicted you of. But in these courts and with these rules that she mentioned, relevant conduct, and I'm going to read it directly from the paper so anybody can understand it. If we still didn't make it clear enough, he's saying that him and Anton White and many other people are being sentenced for things that the jury never heard. So we basically saying that it's not fair and that we trying to challenge this and we trying to support and piggyback on any other type of legislation that's going there. So without talking you to death too much about that, I want to get into talking to Missy Hicks about Eric, and want to read a couple things. So before I go into some of these questions I had with her, for people who don't know or just clicked on, right, I'm gonna read a little bit of what the case actually says about the background. And remember, I'm not saying these things actually happen, but Missy done already cleared the way for us to talk about this, where she said that Anton and Eric, they don't even challenge the jury's verdict. We all can understand that, because a drug conspiracy, even at the max, should have gave them no more than 20 or 30 years. Even at the max, they should be on their way home now. We not challenging that, some drug dealer was going on. They saying cool with that, but they saying none of these violent acts occurred, none of these murders occurred, none of these things that they saying that we did to give us life without parole occurred. So I'm gonna go into a little bit of the background for y'all that don't know. So if you're not really hip to some of the things that happened back in the 90s during the murder capital era, when DC was kind of like out of control, the First Street Crew caught a case during that time, right? What I will say, that's my personal opinion, is that if you don't know about DC, we don't really do a gang thing, but if you grow up on a block or in a neighborhood, you're going to be identified as that as well. So we don't even have to say that there's really a First Street Crew, because law enforcement is going to already identify anybody from the 18 and 1900 block of First Street at the time as the First Street Crew, right? Okay, so this is the factual background right here. Starting in early 1988 for approximately 5 years until the defendant's arrest, the First Street Crew sold large amounts of crack in the area of First and Thomas Street Northwest. Anton White orchestrated the group's activities, working with several friends, including Eric Hicks from the outset, and Ronald Hughes, who began working with White in 1990. Although White initially sold small amounts of cocaine, he soon became a wholesale supplier, selling weight and fronting his cohort smaller amounts of cocaine to sell for him. Hicks eventually took charge when White was out of the neighborhood, i.e. in prison. The First Street Crew's drug operation involved violent activities, including the murder and intimidation of witnesses against them. For example, ample evidence showed that the October 6, 1992, White and Hughes murdered Arvell Williams, and an acquaintance who White was assisting in the U.S. Attorney's Office in investigating the First Street Crew. After White correctly suspected that Williams was cooperating with law enforcement, White and Hughes shot Williams 16 times at close range. and Williams was pronounced dead on the scene. Several witnesses identified the shooters as White and Hughes. Moreover, one witness testified that after the murder, he had overheard a conversation between White and Hughes in which one of them said, "We killed that motherfucker." And the other witness testified that White had told him, "We took care of Williams." In March of '93, White, Hicks, Hughes, and two other co-defendants were charged in a 26-count indictment with conspiracy to distribute cocaine base, cocaine, RICO conspiracy, and numerous individual counts of drug distribution. Trial began in November of 1993 and went to the jury approximately 3 months later on January 28, 1994. And I'm gonna stop right there as we go into that. And I'm gonna remind you, because reading some of those things even hit me hard, and didn't even want to read and reiterate some of these things, because these are the same rumors and vicious lies that have been perpetuated by rats and witnesses to say that they did this. And I want to take a time out and not let it linger on too long. This comes out of this real court paper I'm reading. This ain't no internet stuff I'm reading. This real court papers, all right? And you see in these court papers that the judge and the district court for the District of Columbia are still saying 27 years later that they were responsible for the murders and for the violent activities. The murders have never been charged. They was indicted and they was dismissed, so they're not convicted of it. Other people have been convicted of some of the other crimes. So for real, to make a sidebar of everything we talking about, they shouldn't even still be talking about these murders and these violent acts, because now 30 years later it's been proven and debunked, and they know that they're not responsible for these murders or these violent acts. And another thing that I'm sure we're going to get into that I got to make mention that I just saw it, is that they said in here later that Eric Hicks specifically sold 21 keys. Missy Hicks already told us that there were no drug amounts ever given to the jury. So we could get back to that, and if I see any questions in here, we could get to that too. But I just want to start off at the beginning. So that's what they're accused of, and I want to ask you, Missy, you know, how did your husband get arrested, and what do you remember about that time?
Well, my husband, he was arrested in 1993 due to an investigation of the so-called First Street crew, and like you just mentioned, my husband was not a part of a crew, a gang, or mob. He was, you know, associated with his brothers, his friends, who they rode bikes together. They played football together. They ran up and down the back alleys of First Street together. They were friends. Before co-defendants, they were brothers, right? So you can't mention Eric without mentioning Tone. And one shouldn't mention Tone without mentioning Eric in regard to this case, right? Ronald, he is one of our brothers, one of their brothers. Doomy, one of their brothers. Danny, one of their brothers. So I just wanted to put that out there first, because, you know, they're not a mob. You know, they are brothers. They are friends before co-defendants. But so in 1993, he was investigated for the so-called First Street crew. He was associated with a number of things, which a lot of those things were not true. He was charged with drugs, firearms, and the CCE, the Continual Criminal Enterprise. And consequently, he was convicted in 1994 for crack offenses, for which a jury found no amount of drugs, right? What do they call it? Ghost drugs or something like that? Yeah. A mistrial was declared for the CCE, and my husband was acquitted of the gun charges. He was not convicted of any violent activity at all, none. What our family remember about the ordeal is that we were scared. We were confused. We are still confused, because there were just so many discrepancies in the case, which there still are. We didn't understand the law then, and it's still hard for us to understand it now, to be honest. But what we never thought in a million years is that we'll be sitting here today having this dialogue with you right now. Our aunt never thought that nearly 3 decades later that she'll still be subjected to a 15-minute phone call with her nephew, who's more of like a son to her, you know. So that is how it has affected us. And anything else, but
yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And for real, I wanted to ask that question and kind of, you know, throw it in, because sometimes when I talk to people that I'm familiar with, I forget the basic things. And I'm even glad that you had Aunt Tanya come on and say those things, little things like the 15-minute phone calls, because I was just, not to get off subject, I was just talking to a young brother that's facing a lot of time, and I tried to remind him of those type of things right there. But, you know, he ain't got to that level yet. He at the beginning. You know, you talking about somebody that's like a veteran in this struggle right here. And, you know, I commend you and I commend everybody that support these brothers for all that time. You said something about that you were scared and confused, right? And I wanted to, before I even go to the next question, as we said, I knew I would come with something else that you said something about. But when you say, you know, scared and confused, can I ask you, did anyone in the family have any understanding of the difference in superior court law and federal court law at the time?
A little. A little. My aunt says not much. You know. Not much.
Well, I asked you that. Let me tell you why I asked you that. I asked you that because I was incarcerated with Anton, Erg, Tone, Ronald, everybody. I was in jail in '93, right? And I was in superior court, so I didn't have to worry about these things that we talking about now, right? But I never knew ever that you could be charged with something, get found not guilty of it, or have it dismissed, or just have it dropped and go away, and that a judge could sentence you for it. So all my whole bid, I did 17 years, and I learned a little bit of law, just enough to get me out, right? I never knew all these years that my homies was in on this case, and they were using things that they weren't found guilty of in court on them. So in my ignorance, and I'm sure I'm speaking for a lot of us, right? In my ignorance, we always was like, damn, you know, they got it out for Tone and them. They doing anything. But in the process of that ignorance and not being able to look it up, I never realized, and I'm gonna get into it now because I would like to answer for anybody who felt like me. I didn't realize that there are laws that are written that are like catchphrases and loopholes that say, if you get away with this, we still gonna get you on the back end. Because for those who don't know, the jury is supposed to protect us from tyranny. And for people who don't understand what that was, that when this country was formed, they claimed that they was getting away from the tyranny in Europe and Great Britain, and they wanted to make these laws to protect the people, for the people, by the people. But for real, that's like having a protector, like a shepherd or somebody that guards you. So after the jury said you did this and you didn't do this, which is guilty and not guilty, the jury is taken out of the courtroom, and then we go into a whole nother lynching phase. And I'm gonna call it a lynching phase because some things is done that's incorrect and they wrong, and they remind me of lynchings. And the reason why I say they remind me of lynchings, because worst case scenario, Eric Hicks and Anton White could be on their way home right now, and even if they got the maximum for the drug dealing, right? But the lynching comes in effect, and now you pile on all these other legally castrating and suffocating charges, right? And you give them life without parole for something that didn't even happen, and the jury is no longer there to protect us. The newspaper is no longer there to talk about it. The same newspaper that was in it that said they killed 1 million people, they was on the phone telling people to kill people, they sold 1 million pounds of 1 million keys of drugs. The newspaper sized this up, as we say in DC. For people who don't understand what I mean by that, you know, they hyped this up, they trumped this up, and the newspaper trumped this up. But nevertheless, they stay on point. Get all the way back to sentencing. The jury is not there, and the newspaper is not there, and it's only the government. And what I mean by the government is the prosecution, the U.S. Attorney's Office, who prosecuted these guys, and the judge. So now, 20 years later, me, you, and anybody else that care, some of us are just learning of some of these laws just now to this day. And I'm sure that Eric Hicks and Anton White at some point in time, I know that they very articulate and knowledgeable what's going on now, but I'm sure at some point in time they couldn't explain what had been done in the beginning. Right. Is that would I be correct to say that?
Very correct. They had to educate themselves on it, just like we are, just like we had to, because you don't know that those clauses are in there.
So before I get to the next one, I wanted to go into, you actually answered some of the stuff that I had for the next question, but when I say what was it like for you during trial, right, and how did that affect you, I know that you kind of answered some of that in my first question, but when I say what was it like for you during trial, I kind of want you to go into, you know, as a wife and as a family member, and Anton, you can jump in too, right? Did you all have any belief that the justice system was going to work and life without parole wasn't going to come and they were going to be clear? Like, did you believe that it wasn't a railroad? Like, did y'all really sit in there and believe that y'all had a chance to win?
Well, half and half. Yeah. You know, it was half and half. We definitely do feel that the system failed us. Um, you know, there were so many speculations and hearsay regarding the case, and it seemed like everything just happened so fast for our family. Again, we were scared. We were scared of the unknown, of what was, what wasn't, what could be, what was true, what was false. It was very tough when our grandmother, who raised Eric, um, uh, you know, rest her soul, but when she instilled in him the core morals and principles, she knew that her grandson was much more than what the picture about him was painted to be, and it troubled her having to listen uh, to the things that they accused him of. We experienced a high level of anxiety, but we remained hopeful. But again, unfortunately, the system failed us, and as taxpayers and as law-abiding citizens, and you know, as Americans who fought for the liberty and so-called democracy of this country, like our late grandfather, he fought in World War II. Our late uncle fought in the Vietnam War. Our sister fought in the Iraq War. Us as taxpayers, we the family of Eric feel that the system has failed us tremendously. And because of its continued efforts to keep my baby languishing behind the veils of the prison walls, they failed us, you know, and they're still failing us today by their denied, even as recently as the FSA with the First Step Act denied them again.
I was going to ask you that. You could go into that right now too, because I wanted to ask you, like, what are they saying no for now? So for real, we could venture over into that.
I mean, it doesn't make sense to me, the reasons why that, you know, she outlined of why it's a, you know, the relevant conduct for my husband in particular. I know the judge had used something about him obstructing justice and fleeing the scene. So when they were arresting him or trying to arrest him, he fled the scene. He damaged some cars. He damaged some vehicles. You know, there was no bodily damage or harm to anyone. Only
and no charge.
And no charges. You know, only to property. But she used that as one of her merits to deny him relief. You mean to tell me 27 years later, you know, that is the only thing that you can stick to your guns to about him fleeing the scene? You know, one of the things. So.
Yeah, so, and for people who don't understand what she's talking about for fleeing the scene, so he was never charged with fleeing the scene. He was never charged with damaging no property. But when he got sentenced for what they said he was guilty of, they said, oh, you did this and you did that, and we're going to look on this paper right here, and we're going to give you some more points. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not. I could be wrong, and I'm not looking at no papers right here. But for them to get life without parole, I think you have to go over 40 or 42. Do you know that?
Yeah, I think it's 40, 42, 43, something like that. They kept enhancing it and enhancing and enhancing, you know, to get to that number.
Until they got to that life without parole number. Now they get to this life without parole number for something that a jury never heard. And in all actuality, a police officer could just say that, hey, he ran down the street. There's no proof, no witnesses verified it, no nothing. But not to get too deep into that, I just want people to understand that it's not even about what you did, what you charged with, and how many years you get in federal court. It's about what they find you guilty of, and then what they say you did, and then how many points that adds up to. Because when I was reading something in their case, for one point in time on Eric's point lines, just 2 points had put him in the life without parole, correct? Something it was just like 2 points took him to the next level. So I know that I read something about the gun and something about them running from the police, but what I want people to understand is that the man was never charged with this. This is not what they sent him to court for. You know what I mean? The stuff that they sent him to court for, they're supposed to give him life without parole. The jury said no. You know what I mean? So we'll go back to that, but I just wanted to go into that because you did just mention it, and to not like swing the pendulum, right? But I'm gonna do it a little bit, right? We understand that Tone's situation is different, and I'm gonna go into that. I'm gonna make a big point about Ronald even being released, and he said it was cool to go into that, so I'm gonna do that, right? Now, in Tone matter, we know that they used in the murder. That seems and sounds like, oh, it's a big charge. He didn't do it. He didn't get convicted of it. So we can still understand that the judge is trying to do that, and we're not gonna condone that. But for Eric, the stuff that they're saying that he did, which is why I'm trying to go back to you, if he ran from the police and he damaged property, if he had a gun on him, let's give him the maximum for the gun. At that time, it would have been 5 years. The running from the police would have been no more than 5 years. So even if you want to give him that, you want to punish him and not let him go, I think you should be able to at least logically say we're going to give him relief from the life sentence, because 10 years of punishment would have been more than enough for them if they even charged that. If DC police, Metropolitan Police would have charged him with fleeing and eluding and then charged him with a gun altogether in Superior Court, he would have been down low and been home in 24 months. So it just goes to show, like, I don't want to get into statehood and all this other stuff, man. You know what I mean? But it is what they call in law is arbitrary and capricious. One thing applies for one group of people, and one thing don't apply for another group of people. This dude, Roger Stone, sent a text message to a witness in a federal case and said, "You're going to die." He sent another text message to a witness in a federal case and say, "Do the Pangellini." If anybody knows, you talking about First Street Crew was a gang and a mob. Pangellini comes from the movie The Godfather, so we got to do it at the level of presidential associate saying do a Pangellini, which means lie to Congress. Why they not gangsters? Why they don't make a big thing of saying that's a mob and that's a gangster? And then I know it's hypothetical, but they more. What sounds more gangster? Somebody running from the police to evade an arrest, which is a natural instinct, fight or flight. So we not fighting because he ain't gonna kill the police and go to jail and get the death penalty. But you got Roger Stone now, right? That Donald Trump and them is speaking out against, saying, "Hey, the sentencing is unfair. That's crazy." Why is it not unfair? Why did you not understand that everybody else has been doing this? Tone said for 40 years, and I'm actually read some of that letter, like you read some of Eric's letter, because it's a good point. But I wanted to make that point that Roger Stone has done the exact same thing. Threaten the witness, but not really threaten the witness. So in his situation, they say, I didn't really threaten the witness, but in the First Street Crew case, they alleged that Ronald Hughes told a guy if he testified on him and something happened, he gonna get him. Where's the proof? Did he ever get got? He testified on him, he didn't get got. So it's almost like everything that they use when I look back through the case that they said they gave the government a proffer of all type of evidence supporting the threat and the danger to witnesses and witnesses being hurt. None of it was proven by the end. So, you know, I always want to make that point when we go there, but I want to get back to Erg real quick and ask you, over these years, how have you been able to maintain and stay strong and continue to fight? Like, what keeps you going? How do y'all battle this for people who might not understand? Because a lot of women, you know, they fold and leave, and I don't even condemn them or talk bad about them. Sometimes this pressure just crumbles situations, and like I said, I did 17 years. The only person that did all my time was my aunt that raised me. And, you know, I know that was out almost like a dog mother loyalty type, like just super duper situation. But how do you maintain that, you know, how do you stay strong, and how do you keep the hope up with this matter right here?
Well, that question, it is challenging. It is challenging, but an easy answer is love. I love my husband. It's simple. Our aunt loves her nephew. Our sister loves her brother. Our son, he loves his father. My husband is my best friend. He's my rock. And so whenever I start to fall weak, I look at how strong my husband is under these circumstances, and how strong he's always been, for that matter. I look at, even in this unfortunate position, I've never, ever witnessed him make excuses for anything, nothing at all. The resilience in him alone, it gives me strength to continue to fight, you know. It does, and that's what they want for us to do. They want for us to give up on our loved ones. You know, they want us to forget them in there, because, like, if we don't advocate for them, you know, who will? If we don't continue to fight, who will? And it's apparent that the government thinks that my husband is just a number. He isn't. He isn't a number. He is a human being. He breathes air out his lungs. He has purpose. You know, he has family. He loved, and he is loved. And our family will spend the rest of our years fighting for what and who we love, and that is for his freedom. And yeah, that's to sum it up. You want to add anything on?
You couldn't say that no better, man. This sound like Patti LaBelle almost.
My favorite.
That's my favorite.
That's my Patti.
All right. So look, I'm gonna skip the next question because you kind of went into it already with the other one. But and within that question, it just made me think about something when you talked about these struggles. So Again, can you remind the people, man, how much time the big homie Eric done and where he's been in some of these places and what you've had to go through, even just doing this bid with him and going to some of these different prisons and what he experienced with that? Like, can you even mention some of the things that may even stand out about some of these prisons he's been to?
Yeah, so he's been away now for 27.5 years. When he first was arrested, he went down to Lorton for a short period of time, but he was instantly sent out on the West Coast to California. California, I believe he was in Lompoc. Yeah, Lompoc
Yep.
for a few years. Yeah, he was in Lompoc for a few years. They did not want him, Tone, Ronald. They didn't want them over here on the East Coast. You know, I think Tone maybe went in Colorado. Ronald went somewhere else. So he was in Lompoc, and there were so many stories that he told me about that place that it's so unsettling for me. The things that he had to endure over there. I mean, even with the different with the gang violence and the COs and just all all that stuff. It's hard to think about. It's even hard to repeat. You know.
Let me throw you another question on that same level though, because I definitely know, man, some things we can't talk about anyway. But I definitely understand that pressure, especially when I speak to some of the women in my life that did the time. I've had conversations with them since I've been home that's been like so enlightening, almost made me feel selfish about some things that I was even upset about when I was away. You know how it go, man. You know, when you in, the walls around you and you want things done when you want them done, and man, you forget how much of a demand life is on people, especially people that got to deal with quote unquote your bullshit and what they going through out here. But yeah, Eric name be popping as far as in the federal system, as far as some of the guys that know law. And I wanted to know, like, how did he get good at law, and where did this knowledge of the law come from, especially when we talking about how ignorant a lot of us were in the beginning. Can you go into any type of understanding of what he got out of the law library, how he got to bounce around those books and learn some of these things to be able to articulate what his constitutional rights are?
Well, Eric has always been articulate way before prison. Very small, always. My aunt can, dive into that when he was a kid and, growing up.
Kept your
Yeah. While he was in prison, he realized, just how much money he was wasting on legal fees, and realized that he did not need to put his trust fully into one being, into one person. Therefore, he took and excelled in paralegal courses, where he obtained his paralegal certificate, passing with honors.
I ain't even know that myself, but I mean, that's you taking on responsibility.
Yeah, right. He done that, and I like to describe him as a perfectionist in his craft, right? And when I'm there with him on those weekends, which I call our quality times, it makes me smile, just with pride, just to witness the families of other inmates when they walk up to him and just thank him for the work that he's done for their loved ones, to overturn their case, or get a motion, that come home,
time reduction, any type of relief. Yeah,
right. And there was one instance where this woman, she practically wanted to hug him, and was just like, oh, thank you so much, you got my son home. And so, but I've witnessed him create miracles for other people. And he has always, and he still is, working so hard and so diligently to boomerang that effect for him and Tone. He's so selfless. Yeah. He don't only talk about himself. He wants this so bad for himself and Tone. And he's dedicated. So he isn't going to stop. And that is another thing where I believe you asked, like, how do I keep going and stay strong? It's him. Yeah. It's him. I see his strength. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. And I mean, for real, I want to stop right there, man. And on behalf of all the homies, and all the homies know what I'm talking about when I say the homies. I'm talking about the real homies. I ain't talking about these jokers. But on behalf of all them, we got to give a big shout out to Eric because, you mentioned a couple incidents, but I know more than dudes I could count on my hand that said that he helped them in the law library. He gave them some type of understanding of law and got some type of relief for them that their lawyers wasn't even getting. And I'm the type of person that my family paid money for some lawyers while I was in to help me and assist me, and they didn't do nothing. And in all actuality, all the change that they spent, I ended up getting in the law library myself and getting the relief for almost free.
Right.
You know what I mean? Your time not free, so that's why I said almost free, but I didn't pay no lawyer to do it. So, I got a lot of that inspiration from watching guys like a guy named Eddie Mavis, another guy named Corey Moore. These guys were always in the law library, and they always started out with humongous sentences, right? And I'm going to take it all the way back to another good friend of ours, like Marky and them on that New Street case. It gave me so much inspiration. It was like lightning in a bottle. I said, dang, these dudes got a life without parole sentence, and they got back. So that gives me that hope that Tone and them is going to one day get back. And then when you look at Ronald's situation right now, which we might as well go into that for y'all that don't know, Ronald Hughes was a co-defendant on there. Shout out to Doomy, and shout out to Danny and all those other good men that stood firm too. Shout out to them, no doubt. But in Ronald's situation, Ronald then been released. Ronald was accused of the murder as well. The judge know that, and this judge still released him for everything. So if Ronald has been released and he was accused of the murder and he's out here, he's not biting nobody head off, he's not disappearing nobody, then the same relief can be granted to Tone. The same relief can be granted to Erg. It's not like either one of those guys are Hannibal Lecter. Let's be for real. I mean, I'm almost wondering, man, can we, petitions don't really do nothing to my understanding in federal court. Petitions are good for legislation and stuff like that. And people ask me to do some petition for this matter right here. I don't think that's really, I don't think that's the lick, but I would do anything to support or try.
You know what I mean? So that's something that I battle with. Like, what is it that we can do?
That's what I wanted to get to. So I was thinking, man, first and foremost, that law that we was discussing, the law for the prohibiting of acquitted conduct, that law right there, I always forget how there's a bunch of words, but it's basically this law that they're trying to pass right now to stop them from doing what we said that they are doing already as far as sentencing you for things you weren't found guilty of. Some type of way we got to galvanize some energy for that. And support that. But I was also wondering, and maybe, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, I was wondering, could we create a campaign or even some type of petition to even petition straight to the judge that's presiding over this First Step Act that they got? Because the point that Ronald's made is that, listen, I've come home, I haven't done anything, I've worked, all these people have supported me, and the judge has released me. That judge that took that same risk on Ronald, right? Ronald is really representing for the homies in a way that's far beyond any type of rough and tough stuff we could do, because he represented in a way where he's saying, look, I'm one of these guys. I'm not apologizing that I'm one of these type of guys. These guys are my brothers, and now I'm out, I'm thorough, I'm strong, and I'm walking a certain type of line. I've got a family, I've got responsibilities, and the judge acknowledged it. I read the paperwork, he allowed me to read it. And the judge acknowledged it. So if the judge acknowledged all that, we saying that this is one of these same type of people that you said was in this group right here. This is the type of changes that they made. And I'm wondering if we could get a bunch of people to petition this judge to look at the decision they made on Ronald and give Eric and Tone another reconsideration. Now, legally, I know that that's not a real legal shot, but I'm at this point in time, I just want to be able to do anything and take any chance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I'm telling you, man, Ronald done made a hell of a move with what he's done to even get off of it, and the judge done gave the leeway. If the judge can click and get a leeway on that, I'm saying we know and we can prove. I'm telling you for sure, I can prove that at least 3 of those violent acts that they're attributing to him that they keep mentioning, right? Another homie of ours has been found guilty of this. Now, we're not laying no blame at their doorstep. We ain't doing nothing hot at all, right? These homies gonna fight this case as long, and we say that they saying that they didn't do it too, but they stand convicted of it. So my point is this: they cannot stand convicted of it and have life sentences, and they still saying in the federal paperwork that Tone and them did it. Because remember, for y'all that don't know, the United States Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia prosecutes Superior Court and District Court. So If they was prosecuting Tone and accusing Tone and Eric and them of being responsible for these violent acts in federal court, they came from the same building that the prosecutor in Superior Court was over there trying these other guys and convicted these other two guys of. So, like, we don't got to say their names and we ain't got to go into what the cases of, but anybody that know legally or in the streets know that they can't still be. I just read it, and the reason why I read it straight from the paper is because the judge mentioned the murder of Arvell Williams and all these other violent acts. Some of these violent acts have already been case closed. They should not still be using it 27 years later. And somebody got to give us an opportunity or a line of communication to be able to voice that, because like you said, or like I said, when the jury not there and the newspaper not there, who else knows that the same year that they got found guilty for what they got found guilty of, and they didn't find guilty of these violent acts, that another group of black men did get found guilty of the violent act. You can't have a lynch in both ways. You can only lynch one of them.
Right. That's very true. Yeah, for sure.
You know what I mean? I'm gonna read a little bit of, man, I think we what time is it? I want to read a little bit of this
Go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna read a little bit of this. I'm not gonna read all of it because it's kind of long, but I want to read some of it. That's the main points. But this is a letter for y'all that don't know. When y'all get a chance, I want y'all to go check out ourcitydc.com for the website. You can check it out, or you can follow the link in the bio. But a lot of these writings from Tone and Eric, they are on here, and these points that we making, we're not making those super secretive legal points. Like, I'm not Thurgood Marshall at all. You know what I mean? I could just read and comprehend. This is coming from information from people who have already been sanctioned to these illegal crimes and sentences. So without saying, I'm just gonna go into this one that it taught me a lot when I read this letter. And this letter is addressed to the National Newspaper and Publication Associations. On behalf of the melange of voices, this by Tone too, African, Latino, and Native Americans unjustly sentenced federal prisoners, we remonstrate and echo, we are our voices. Where are our voices? It is a tragedy that we are so divided and have been bamboozled and hoodwinked by political and mainstream propaganda to have no gauge the social injustice that has wreaked an epidemic of mass incarceration and heretofore has havoc and destabilizing effects upon disadvantaged communities and families. Conversely, mass incarceration is the worst legitimized form of racial discrimination and social injustice in America's history. Its only rival was slavery and Jim Crow, separate but equal doctrines. Nevertheless, the catalyst for the rise of mass incarceration is an unlawful practice that has for decades employed the counts as an instrument of persecution to perpetuate a policy of unconstitutional rulings that directly negates the natural rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of an accused, i.e. a criminal defendant, by inexplicably allowing judges to increase a sentence based upon uncharged, dismissed, and acquitted offenses. The practical consequences of using uncharged, dismissed, and acquitted offenses are significant to longer sentences, with a disproportionate impact on the prison terms of minorities, from a range of a number of months up to life in prison without a legal guilt of a jury or an omission by the criminal defendant. Thus, this blatantly violates the criminal conviction standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt as required by the Fifth Amendment, which what Eric was speaking about in his letter. The Fifth Amendment due process clause as a fundamental principle of the American criminal justice system to protect against factual error whenever a potential loss of liberty is at stake, regardless of the identity of the crime. Fundamentally, the use of uncharged, dismissed, and acquitted conduct as a basis of punishment has no jurisprudence, according to the U.S. Constitution. Furthermore, the Sixth Amendment guarantees of a trial by a jury offers security against the prejudice of a judge. Therefore, no official of the court cannot be justified on the basis of bad conduct alone or how convincing the evidence without the upending legitimate due process that results in the legal guilt. So basically saying no judge should be able to sentence you for something that the jury didn't, Tone got kind of deep right there. No judge should be able to sentence you for nothing that the jury did not say that you were guilty of. The jury is the judge and the executioner before the judge passes the sentence.
That's right.
Nevertheless, this unlawful practice by the court as a matter of law under the pretext of fundamental mandatory minimum sentencing and judicial discretion has resigned for nearly 40 years. Obviously, there's a disconnect between the bureaucrats and their oath to uphold, serve, defend, and execute the U.S. Constitution. The institutions of government were established to serve and protect the weak from the strong. Thereby, if the government has all the power in their hands and can manipulate and control the law, the evidence, and the determination of the facts, their virtue of justice will remain and be maintained. In theory, we reside in a democratic nation. The application of legal guilt without justice of a trial by a jury or omission of guilt by the accused is brutal, and there's nothing democratic about brutality. Real justice expounds on fairness, that every American is innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Take for a living example, this is a good point I want everybody to pay attention to this one. This told me a lot. Take for a living example the case of Keith Matthews, who went to trial by jury on 8 counts of an indictment. The government put on their best case, yet the jury acquitted Matthews of 7 of the 8 counts. However, as sentencing, the government urged the court to sentence Matthews for some of the acquitted conduct, regardless of what the jury said when they found him not guilty. That we ain't making this up, this real life. When they said not guilty of such conduct, to be exact, the government stated, we understand the jury's verdict, but we also understand that the sentencing the guideline range did not take into account the factual evidence that this man was involved with. The constitutional power of the jury in cases like these is made impotent due to the U.S. sentencing guidelines, rendering the entire jury process a sideshow, as the D.C. Circuit Judge Patricia Malik put it. A D.C. Circuit Judge said that, and she in the same court building that's denying them their relief. Thus, the shameful practice of circumventing the Constitution's 6th Amendment and its protection of a trial by jury that has resulted in the draconian over-sentencing of defendants by more than 300% for 40 years in some cases. Cases like that of the United States versus Gregory Bell, who went to trial facing a 13-count indictment. The jury acquitted him of 10 of the 13 counts. The 3 counts that Matthews was found guilty of would have only carried about 51 to 63 months of imprisonment, as the jury would have had it. Yet at sentencing, the courts found that Matthews was in fact guilty of the same conduct the jury acquitted him of and sentenced him to 192 months of imprisonment. Again, the entire jury process was a formality at best. It is a disgrace how America can become the beacon of hope to the injustice of the world and still endorse a sentencing policy that conspires to extinguish the hopes and dreams of so many lives. We, the unjustly sentenced prisoners, need bureaucrats of Congress and court to be imbued with a voice and a spine to stand up completely and overhaul the long overdue injustice. Consequently, it will eradicate the sentencing disparity, repair the fabric of the minority community and family, as well as cure the mass incarceration crisis. The Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 that reduced the disparity between the amount of crack cocaine and powder cocaine needed to trigger certain federal criminal penalties from 100-to-1 weight ratio to an 18-to-1 weight ratio, eliminated the 5-year mandatory minimum sentencing for simple possession of crack cocaine, among other provisions. It took Congress 24 years to address the disparity of the sentencing of African Americans that were sentenced for crack cocaine offenses. 24 years for crack cocaine offenses. As with the Fair Sentencing Act, the people desperately need an act of Congress to address the use of acquitted, uncharged, and dismissed conduct as sentencing phases of court proceedings. To date, there is a movement by key members of Congress to eliminate acquitted conduct sentencing. The Prohibited Punishment of Acquitted Conduct Act conduct as sentencing is the only legislation that seems to address this shameful and oppressive practice on behalf of the U.S. courts. The much needed fix of this injustice is to amend, this is the law for anybody that out there that know or care, to amend 18 U.S.C. section 3661, which states, no limitation shall be placed on the information concerning the background, character, conduct of a person convicted of an offense which a court of the United States may receive and consider for purposes of imposing an appropriate sentencing. If you don't understand what that means that anything that they come in there and they say as sentencing can be used. If you got found guilty of carrying a gun and you beat the murder and you beat the carjacking, they mean they're going to sentence you for the murder and the carjacking even if you didn't do it. That's exactly what that means. So that's the part of the law that got to be taken out. Otherwise, we just talking, we just marching for nothing. And the last part of it says that such legislative action to be fair must be made retroactive, because a lot of laws have been made to address these problems that we done talked about today. Blakely, Booker, and dudes that's in the law can name 50 other cases. Those two is good enough for me. They didn't make the cases retroactive, so they got all these guys to get relief and get all type of reductions of sentences as they come. And I don't want to get into no racist type of situation, but one of these cases that Tone sent me where they gave the guy the action is so crazy that this guy shot into the home of some African Americans. And when he was arrested, he allegedly told the police, "Oh, I don't want darkies in the neighborhood," or something, right? The police remembered it. He went to trial, got found guilty of shooting in their house, which should have only gave him about 2 years. The judge said, "No, you mentioned a racial slur in the process, so we're going to give you 12 years. And they did this enhancing thing on him that we talking about. It take a white man to get back for shooting in the house of some black people and say he shot in the darkies for them to change the law for him to go forward. But you telling me Tone and Erg locked up and they can't make it retroactive? Like, I don't know if people understand it. I'm saying that they made this law for this white man that shot in these black people's house, and he got burnt up for it because he said he shot into the darkies' house. They took the time back, only gave him the punk little time for the gun, and you said, "Oh, we ain't gonna fix everything else." So, you know, I'm gonna kind of like leave it there with that matter. I'm gonna end with this little quote that Tone had on there by Thomas Jefferson. It says, "A Bill of Rights is what people are entitled to against every government on earth." Also in 1789, Thomas Jefferson warned that the judiciary is given too much power. A judiciary that is given too much power might ruin our republic and destroy our rights. So, you know, with that said, I think we covered a lot. And, you know, I just wanted to ask you if there's anything else that you kind of like wanted to add to what this whole scenario is.
You said that I wanted to add. Oh,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I believe we pretty much covered everything. I just know that, you know, there was one more piece of the preponderance of evidence that my husband had wrote, and he wanted me to make sure I comment on, you know, for just to distinguish that, you know, there are two sentences within the American judicial system that shares virtually the same characteristics, and that is a death sentence and a sentence without the possibility of parole. And we all understand what a death sentence is. Life without the possibility of parole, it deprives a defender of the most basic liberties without giving hope outside of the prison walls. No chance of reconciliation, no hope at all. And in a word, right, it functions as an alternative death sentence. So when they sentence someone to life without the possibility of parole, it's ultimately it's the same thing as a death sentence. And our thing is
a death sentence.
You know, when is enough enough? Again, you know, my baby's there with no violent convictions or anything, just for selling drugs. How much longer do our family have to suffer? How much longer do we have to pay? How much time do we have to give back for selling drugs? You know, enough is enough, and we're tired, we're upset, and we want change. It's definitely time for him to be home.
The whole family is pretty much dying out. Literally, his next of kin. I mean,
right.
His immediate family, everybody else has passed. You know, it's just sad. I would love to see him.
And she would love to see him. You know, like she said, she's the last one left, basically, with his immediate family. And he grew up right here. We are in the house around First Street where he grew up at with her, you know. And so it was important for me to come here to do this dialogue with you, you know, with her. So we appreciate you for taking the time doing this with us. We appreciate our city for, you know, this platform and, you know, whatever we can do to just bring attention and awareness. We're fighting. We're not giving up.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to, man, extend a big thank you to both of y'all again, man. Also, extend a thank you for just allowing me to be part of it, because you know, see, a lot of times, man, we think that everything got to be about glitz and glamour. You know, you got to do the hard work.
Right.
Like Lord willing, Eric and Tone come home, right? But when Eric and Tone do come home, everybody gonna be like, oh, this and all that, and I did this and I did that, man. You know, I ain't been around as a part of this struggle as long as y'all have, and I ain't gonna pretend like I have, but everybody, you know, a bunch of rocks and bricks build big
That's right.
buildings.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So I think we got to look at it like chopping a tree down. We constantly keep working on it, constantly keep working on it, constantly keep working on it. But I think that we got half the battle won, I want to say, because I think that we understand what they have done to them wrong now. You can't ask for help when you don't know what is wrong. I think we are doing a great job by telling everybody what's wrong. Danny and Ronald and Doomy and all them, when they first start breaking down relevant conduct, a rack of jokers out here. Man, let me get straight to the. Let me say it a little bit more there. A rack of these jokers ain't street niggas anyway, so they don't have no clue what they talking about when they talking about relevant conduct, preponderance of evidence, and using things against you that never got in court. I don't want to go there, but in the process of giving just that little bit of piece of it, you got dudes out here getting a bunch of money, doing a lot of killing. They don't even understand what's going to happen when they go into the courtroom. That's why when they get there, they just tell. That I don't know what, I don't know how to fight. I don't know how to defend myself. My man did it. My man was the connect. We did it in this car. Come on, what y'all want me to do? Now, just because these guys is not those type of guys, you know, we see what happens with it. So, you know, that should be a deterrent from all these guys that really don't have to go down some of these streets, and you know, they got opportunities that these other guys don't have. You know, man, I implore y'all, man, to kind of like think about what's really going on, because if you're really not cut out for this, how many dudes can go ahead and sit in there for this time and say, look, I'm gonna be a man and I'm gonna get out the right way? You know what I mean? Shout out to Eric Hicks, shout out to Anton White, shout out to Tony Lewis and everybody else, but definitely shout out to those guys, because they're in the same scenario, sentencing and doing these, what Tone say, defunct death sentences. How they, that's, you know, basically you got a death sentence because they saying they never gonna let you out. Corona, COVID-19, compassionate release, they're not gonna let you out unless you force them to let you out. And I definitely think that we all need to understand what they using against them, as I said. And if anybody got any help with that, you know what I mean, let's keep that movement going. You know what I mean? We can all say free the real all day, but we got to do something to free the real, man. And I want to end it on that. I want to send my love and respect out to y'all. My love and respect out to Ourcity, man. And I'm gonna catch y'all next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, enjoy your night.
Bye-bye.
Peace, man.